sessions I give, I think, where people laugh out loud. And I like that. It's good.
Well, it is one of the. Well, it's one of those memorable ones because you're looking at all the things and going, "Oh, I've made a mistake,"
Yes.
and you go, "Oh, I shouldn't." Oh, okay, that's why this doesn't work very well, and why this one is better than the other one, and oh, okay, it's yeah, and plus, you are just showing kind of, oh, okay, but I remember that must have been, I can't remember how long ago that was, but that was some years ago.
Yeah, it was actually.
But it was there's a few sessions that I remember. Um, there's only a few that I can remember from that far ago. And
Yeah, I don't remember what I did last week. Sorry. So
no, and I'm just going to apologize because I made a technical mistake and there was a few moments we weren't streaming. Sorry.
oh,
I told you it could get worse, and it did get
that's
worse.
all right. I think it's me. Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes it's like a technical session, and you just all you want to do is for your headphones to work properly, or for it to be less difficult. But I do have to say I use some voice, and I use AI technology in order to clean up my voice. It does not clean up the Scottish accent, so I am very sorry about that. You stuck with that,
You don't need to
which I really like
apologize.
that.
You don't need to apologize from where you're from. That's. I was speaking to. I can't remember her name on the podcast. I'm an awful human being. And she was saying that she has a sound guy who will clean up her vocal and even make her sound less southern. And I don't know how you can do that. If that's even possible.
Yeah, I'm not sure I like that idea because I think sometimes people remember you better if there's something distinctive about you, and that can be your accent or a beard or something a bit different. And I think because I'm actually quite an introverted person, I'm quite shy, I don't stand out in a crowd. Having an accent, people start to think, oh yeah, the Scottish woman. I nearly fell asleep in our session because her voice was so relaxing. At least they remembered me, right?
Well, I don't want to sound heightist, but you're not particularly tall, so you're not going to stand out in a crowd. I mean, you will get swamped by people.
Yeah, that's right. I'm 5'1", so kind of 5'1". So I think being small doesn't help. I think you can also be quite submissive in a crowd of people if you are quite small. I think if you are small but heavier, you sometimes have more presence. And I think one thing I do need to work on is, as a personal goal, is to try and have more presence and not round my shoulders. I've been getting some great coaching advice recently because I feel I need it. I have two mentors, and I've sort of hired someone to help me to speak better. And I don't mean get rid of the accent, but they critiqued my style and they said, why are you rounding your shoulders? And I need to do what I do in weightlifting, which is sort of roll the shoulders back and then head up and speak better. So I've just had that advice, and I need to change my webcam so I look directly at the camera, this kind of thing. But I think there are things that I can work on personally to try and have more presence. And I think that's important. But you're right, it's so easy to be missed in a crowd. And I think sometimes you can rely on something that's distinctive about you. But unless you get to speak, people don't hear your voice anyway. So I don't know, but I'm still learning. I guess that's the point.
There's a couple of things that I mean, they're interesting that completely take us off topic. One is, it sounds like, is this person like an acting coach? Because that's what it sounds like.
They're actually a business leader. The gentleman I'm speaking to is he's on Forbes, he's done TEDx talks. And what I love about him, I don't know if I can give you his name. I don't want to advertise him.
Oh, no, you can. It doesn't. Of course, you can advertise. I mean, we're not. It isn't sponsored by any particular software vendor. You could use any cloud product, Microsoft or the other tiny ones, Google or Amazon. I don't know who they do. They sell books. We're equal opportunities. No, but if he's good, then be good stuff for you. Then yeah, of course.
Yeah, so his name is Christopher Kai, Kai, and he offers services that are like business coaching, and in some ways it's a tough love that I feel that I need. I think when you run your own business, it's very easy to feel that you're right all the time. And trust me, I have lived with myself for over 40 years, and I know that I am not right all the time. But I think I do need to be questioned so I can just basically in some way be a better person than I was yesterday at something, whether that's speaking or writing better, or, maybe just working at becoming more empathetic, which is something I think that everyone should work on, or learning something more about diversity and inclusion. So I think what I get from Christopher is just that assessment of how I come across. And I probably get a very long way to go before I'd be like a TEDx speaker and projecting and having that presence. But I think it's something that I would like to have more of, that I feel it's easy to be ignored if you're small and female. And Kamala Harris had this in one of her election interviews, didn't she? Her phrase was, "I'm speaking." And I can't tell you how much that resonated with me personally, because I've sat in meetings and gone, and sometimes it's been easier to get a man to speak for me, and that's not right. Because I have, industry experience, delivered projects for a long time. And I think until people recognize you or see you, then they don't hear you and they don't value what you say. So I think that's so important with diversity and inclusion, that they recognize in what their values that they bring to the table. And I need to work in myself so I'm seen more, but also I'm trying to work on trying to make sure that I pull others out as well, so that they're seen as well. And it's something I do work very hard on in meetings. One woman I worked beside in the past year at some point is small, and she's a woman of colour, and I felt she's got so much talent, she's so clever, but it was you could see people talking over her and then her just not saying anything. And I would reach out to her in the meeting and say, "Sorry, I don't think you got the chances to finish your sentence. Could we take a moment, because maybe everyone else understood what you were going to say, but I didn't catch it, and I really value what you think," and trying to make room for her. And I'm not sure she appreciated me having to do that. But for me, I think it's so important to try and live that example and try and get a bit better at it every single day. I know this isn't what we were going to talk about.
No,
but I think it's just a key thing for me.
Yeah, so there is no particular direction. I mean, the only direction is what is interesting. And so you mentioned something. We'll go off on that tangent because that's kind of interesting. And we'll finish up. I didn't even ask you what time you want to finish. But it doesn't mean that we can't have another conversation. This is just kind of a starter. You never know where you're going to go with these.
Yes.
But I think it's just really interesting that you feel that you need to learn to project. So so this is just from like stuff that I'm interested in, is comedians have their offstage persona, who might be very introverted and whatever. Then they have their onstage persona. And I was going to mention, only because, and can I ask which bit of Scotland you're from? Because you haven't got I'm going to say Edinburgh, because it sounds a nicer accent than let's face it, nicer than the Glaswegian accent.
Yeah, thank you. From the southwest of Scotland, although I did spend some time up in the north, and quite a bit. So I spent time in Aberdeen, and I spent a lot of my childhood around the Inverness area, Nairn, and also the southwest, where our voices tend to be more breathy. And I think when I grew up in Scotland, it was not good to be different. There's quite a strong Scottish Protestant ethic of you must fit in. And I think that sort of made you a bit submissive in some ways because of that environment. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this, but when I was younger, I was brought up as a Jehovah's Witness. I'm not one now, I should add. But I think being part of that community means that I put the individual is second, the community is first. And that's not a bad thing in a lot of ways. And I think somehow my technical community perspectives have been informed by seeing that community work so well. I don't share their beliefs now, which I think what I learned from them was that they will help each other and the community comes first. I helped to build a Kingdom Hall, believe it or not, in the Southwest. And what we did was if you knew somebody in your area needed shopping, you went and you got it for them. And you didn't ask for money. You just lived out community values, whether it was something like getting shopping or helping to build Kingdom Hall. So I think that is important for me to try and learn from these experiences. So it was quite a shock when I left the Jehovah's Witnesses. I then moved to the Church of Scotland. I wouldn't say I'm religious now, but what that has given me is trying to understand better what faith is and what that means to people, as opposed to being in a very structured religion where you're following rules rather than perhaps internalizing it a lot. But I think living in that environment, you were not always encouraged to speak up or have a viewpoint that was different. And I think that somehow makes you speak more quietly because you're already expecting the answer to be no before you've asked the question in some ways. So I guess that's one reason I'm trying to learn to project myself better, because I'm having to unlearn some other things as well. And you're right about the on-screen and the off-screen persona. I'm much happier in front of an audience instead of being in a crowd. And I know that probably sounds a bit mad, but it means that if I'm speaking in front of the audience, there's an element of control there that you don't always have being part of the crowd. And being quite physically small and maybe physically quite submissive, I'm nervous in crowds. But putting me in front of the audience and in front of the crowd means that my nervousness in some ways is gone. I know that sounds a bit mad, but it's just that's where I'm coming from with these things sometimes.
No, I mean, from the interviews I've heard with comedians, they're exactly the same. They are very introverted. They'll struggle with being with social situations. Speaking to a person one-on-one will be absolutely terrible. But if they're on stage and they're talking to the entire audience, and sometimes the bigger the audience, the better, because in fact they're more anonymous.
Yes.
And it's just you, and they prefer that. I mean, I prefer, I don't know, it depends on what kind of presentation you're doing, I guess, for me, because I like audience interaction. And so having sometimes a smaller audience helps, but jokes don't always carry very well.
It's true. I remember Brent was there attending one of my sessions, and I was terrified the whole way throughout, because I thought, Brent's in my session, he'll be judging me. And he didn't judge me at all. But he came up at the end and he said, your jokes are probably really great for a British audience. He's travelled quite a bit. He said, so I caught them. He said, but from the American standpoint, they're probably wondering why you're saying that. And that's just how it comes across, really, I think, does that make sense? So you're right. It takes a lot of courage to try a joke. I must say that there's a LinkedIn course on improv comedy. I don't know if you've seen it. It's created by a man called Izzy Geldin, I think his surname is. I'm sorry, I can't remember the surname, but I remember the first name. It's Izzy. And it was great. It was a great thing to watch and his perspectives and sort of work through some of the exercises, because he said as a presenter, you have to be able to improvise. Someone asks you a question, and it's the same for a business meeting. So it helps me to understand how I can connect these things together. I'm terrible with names, and I'm sorry I've forgotten his name, but I think having a look at that is a really interesting thing to do.
So do you
So I have improv comedy in my LinkedIn profile.
So do you have like standard retorts then you've got if people ask questions that you don't know the answers to, or so you're not really, it looks like you're making up on the fly, but if in fact you've got them all rehearsed and you know exactly what you're going to say when someone asks you a question, I don't know, that's completely off topic, because people they'll.
Yes. Yeah, I'd learned early in my career that sometimes audience members want to pull you down. So I remember my second SQL Bits session. I was talking about SQL Server reporting services, and I did that for an hour. And then at the end, some gentleman asked me a .NET question, and it was something about .NET. I'm not a .NET programmer, and I was completely thrown. Because he said, you've sat here and talked about reporting services and you haven't mentioned .NET once. And I thought it wasn't in the abstract or the title. So I just went back and I recovered and said, I'm sorry, I didn't intend to cover that. But there are much better .NET speakers than I am. But if you want to come and talk to me at the end, I'll try and point in the direction of someone you can have a deeper conversation with. I think as a presenter, I need to listen very hard to the questions and make sure I answer them. Now, that sounds really obvious, but sometimes people can ask you a question and there's actually a more subtle question behind it. And I'm always trying to work out what's the question behind the question. I know sometimes I think it's a women in technology issue. I ask a question and I get a much higher level answer because somebody has just made the assumption that I'm not technical, I don't know what I'm talking about, so they're just going to give me a sentence like, well, there's this thing called Azure, which is about cloud computing, and which someone did to me recently, and I just thought, you've completely underestimated my question. And they took a few attempts before he understood that. I had to try and work really hard to undo his assumption that actually knew what Azure was. But I think he saw a small woman in his 40s and thought, she's not going to know anything. And it wasn't till the guy next to me put his head in his hands and said to the speaker, you have to stop now. I'm going to rephrase that. And apologised afterwards. But I think for some people, you have to work harder to understand what they're really saying. And it's funny how people's unconscious biases can come out when you ask a question. And I would encourage everyone to ask questions in sessions, but I'd also encourage presenters to try and work out the subtlety and not always assume that the question is a dumb one. I do hear that sometimes in sessions, and I think, no, don't speak to them like that. That person probably took a lot of courage to ask you a question in front of a whole ton of people. Give them a chance. But for me, if I don't know the answer, just say, I will find out for you. Come and talk to me, give me your card. I will follow up.
Yeah. I used to have a slide that said, if I tell people that's a really good question, we'll take it offline, it actually means I have no idea what they're talking about, because that's what other presenters do. I kind of like the sort of the breaking down of those conventions. I think it's funny to let people know that the presenter is human and they're normal. They're not. There's nothing special about them.
That's right. I say to people, I just like the sound of my own voice. and that's that. That's why I'm up here. Because sometimes I meet audience members at SQL Bits, and honestly, technically, they're absolutely superb. And I have to say to them, why are you not presenting? Because honestly, you know this stuff inside out. I can tell you are brilliant. And they say sometimes they say, I don't fancy it. I don't want to speak in public. Or sometimes they say, well, my company doesn't like it. And think, fine, it's a shame, but I think you're right. There is, I think I speak to justify to myself if I know it or not. I feel when I stop presenting, that will be the day when I feel I'm going to start to become less sharp. And that's why I do it,
Yeah. I mean, I hadn't really thought about that. There's a lot.
So why do you present? Do you just like it? I mean, you are sociable. So is it?
Oh, but I'm yeah, no, I'm not. I pretend. See, that is the on-stage persona of, and so is this. You know, I'm just a miserable git most of the time. I mean, this. You ask my wife. God, that sounds like a start for a joke, doesn't it? But yeah, you know, when you're on stage, I couldn't be my normal self, because normally I wouldn't do that. But I find that if there's something that I want to talk about, or I think the last time I did SQL Relay, I did my mantra was, if I'm having a good time, then I don't care about the audience. The audience can come along with me. And
yes,
and really it was about me telling them and about something that I really enjoyed, and hoping that enthusiasm and the odd not so rude joke would go down really well. So some jokes fell flat, absolutely. And when I got an inflatable ball and pushed it out into the audience and told people to push it around, some people didn't like it.
yeah, that's it. I mean, I remember once in one session, it might have been SQL Bits, I can't remember. I used to check Twitter during the session. I say, oh, it's people saying in Twitter. And then I must have said something which was taken as an innuendo, and it just wasn't. I won't repeat it if that's okay, because I've learned my lesson. But people on Twitter started chatting and sort of kicking off because I had said something, and they'd taken it completely not the way I had seen it. But then in standing the stage, checking Twitter, I suddenly thought, oh, and that completely threw me for the rest of the session, so I don't check it now. But it does make me more mindful of jokes, because I think that was just not what I meant. That was no, I was mortified, because I think people that's what they'd remember from the session. They wouldn't remember anything else. They still remember Jen made a dirty joke. No, it didn't. But that's all you remember.
Yeah, I wish I was there. I'm
Well,
sure. Well, clearly it
I wish I
wasn't.
was.
It wasn't a joke, because you probably didn't do the pausing after it. Do you know? I was going to ask a question. Well, we'll save it for later. But just to carry on the, you are technically good. You know your stuff. You've been running Data Relish for quite a significant amount of time. You also have been an MVP for quite a while. And I would do the MVP quiz, but you're not an MVP anymore. And I saw some stuff on Twitter at the time. Do you want to just kind of, I don't think I caught everything that was happening.
Yeah, I'd been an MVP for 9 years, and there were a few episodes I was uncomfortable with, and I'd made repeated complaints to my MVP lead at the time, and for some reason those were not followed up. I think one thing the MVP program could do better is record incidents, and it seems that they don't do that. The MVP program, because you're not an employee, their duty of care towards you is there isn't one, basically. So then there was an incident where, and I don't mean to make people uncomfortable, and you can cut this out if you like, but there was an email where somebody made a rape joke, and I was really, really, really unhappy about that. It actually nearly split me in two when I read it, because I get a lot of harassment online, and I didn't expect that to come in a Microsoft mailing list. And I realised they can't stop MVPs sending or making dirty jokes. But then I just sat and stared in space. I didn't know what to do, and it just knocked me sideways the rest of the day, and it sort of put my own recovery back. So then I complained, once I'd sort of sufficiently able to do that. So I complained, and then nothing seemed to happen, and I, as you probably know, was in the passport. And if you ever had any sort of harassment, anything, you kept the complainant up to date. And you also kept the other side up to date, because things have to be fair, and but I just kept hearing nothing and getting back answers like, oh yeah, we're looking into it. And I think no, I don't think that was handled well. So eventually I woke up in the morning and I thought, I'm not comfortable being part of the programme because I feel I'm being shushed and I don't like that. And I think if I continue, then it's just going to keep happening. And I don't want to validate a programme that could improve in the way that it handles these issues. So I just wrote my email and said, I'm done, I'm out. I hoped it would change things. From what I understand, it hasn't. And I think that's really sad. I don't think they've learned anything. I didn't get an apology. What I did get was from the person who wrote the email saying, I'm sorry if you were offended, but I'm European and I just say things like that. And I haven't responded to the email because I just couldn't. It was a passive aggressive response. So I think the whole thing was handled badly. So the next thing that happened was I blogged to say I was done. And that was that. And I put it on LinkedIn. What I didn't expect after that was the absolute onslaught of responses and the huge outpouring of support that I got. I didn't expect that. I think that people in the main were very kind to me, and that was really surprising. I didn't think I had that much influence at all, really. I thought it was in my little SQL data viz bubble. But the number of people who reached out across the world, and very senior people, some of who you might call in the same technology domain as Microsoft, VP of this, SVP of that. And I was really stunned. 100,000 people read my blog, and I think my LinkedIn post got 120,000 reads. So it was just unbelievable. So I wasn't proud of it. And of course, I can understand people saying, oh, well, why not just stay in the programme and try and sort it out? But I tried to do that for some time. It wasn't, and I just felt powerless. And I thought, I can't keep validating that. So then what I've been trying to do is redefine my relationship with Microsoft after that. Because I do have some really nice Microsoft lovely people in my circle, yourself included, who are just nice to me. So I don't hate all things Microsoft, but I'm uncomfortable about the MVP programme. But people have been really nice to me in the product groups. I'd like to thank the Power BI group, in the Azure Synapse Analytics groups. And I don't want to mention names, for people who have reached out and been kind and made it very clear that I'm still welcome as part of their community, even though I'm no longer an MVP. So I think what else happened was I found that I started to grow more into a thought leadership type role where I wasn't just tied to one vendor, because I think I was very much seen as a Microsoft person, although I've never worked for Microsoft. But I found that I started to get more work from other vendors after that, who valued the skill set that I had, but were aware I needed to increase my expertise in their technology. And I think, so overall it's worked out well, but I think it's worked out well and better for me because somehow my head feels cleaner and my heart feels cleaner, which probably makes no sense in some ways, but I just feel I'm not validating something that I was never comfortable with. And I still think they could do better, but it's up to them. They've got to want to do better. I have ideas on how they can do that, but I think the first thing would be to record when instances happen and take action when they do, and take action swiftly, and none of that happened. So, but that was it. But yeah, you can ask me an MVP quiz if you like, but well, it's not appropriate. I wouldn't be
no, it was. I mean, the MVP quiz is just something really sort of silly and lightweight, and it really was to. No offense to the people that I did it with, was really just to fill some time. Shh, don't tell anybody.
It's okay.
But it's just quite interesting that you feel. I think the word cleaner. I guess because you've exercised that, and you've done something proactive rather than, I guess, sitting back and feeling that kind of stuff is being done to you and you've got no recourse to that. I mean, those kind of jokes. I support free speech, but you can't. But that comes with the responsibility if you don't say daft things at the wrong time. You can you can't change what people think, but you don't put that in an email. And it doesn't matter where you're from. There's no country where I think that joke is any kind of joke like that is acceptable. because
It's professionalism,
I mean,
and I think you bring your professional, like you said, the personas. You have your professional persona,
yeah, and
and you leave that at the door.
yeah, and the MVP community is a community of most valued professionals, and that's not the behavior you expect. And also, the okay, I was going to swear, but we won't do, because it's is that to say that I'm sorry if you felt any offense well, yeah, is that's terrible. That's the
Yeah,
politician. Well, if you're offended, it's your own fault.
yeah. I'm sorry you had a bad experience, which
Well,
is just not an apology. That's
no,
just
no.
it's on you because you're upset, rather than we or us or I have done anything wrong. And I think that's just not right. I think it's about somebody deciding how many lashes you've had. Women technology, sorry. Women technology issues tend to be death of a thousand lashes, but I don't feel it's up to someone to decide how many lashes I've had. And I think that was the problem with that, the actual person saying that. And then, sorry, that's my ring going off. Okay, door here.
It's
So my son's gone to answer the door. But I think it's a death of a thousand lashes. And I think the programme, by sort of not answering me or not really dealing with it, were deciding that they felt I didn't have enough lashes for it to hurt, whereas I actually felt I did have enough lashes for that to hurt. It wasn't up to them to decide, it was up to them to engage, understand with me. And then, because I wasn't the only person that complained, I found out later some other Microsoft people had complained, and so that made me feel less alone. But I think somebody came up with a really interesting question in Twitter, and what they said was, well, we how do you know how to move the needle to make these things better? Because say 100 people read that email and 98% thought it was fine and thought, oh, that's okay, and then you get 2% who say, actually, I'm not comfortable with that. You're in the minority by a large margin. But then you get diversity and inclusion that comes along and it says, well, actually, you're being exclusive to that 2% of people. But then is it who's kind of right? Because according to the majority of people who didn't complain about the email, that for them was okay. One guy just said, oh, I didn't see why you were so upset. I just thought it was not a funny joke. But then he went on to say, I now understand better that actually someone else reading that could have a very different reaction, and it's up to me as a white male, which he happens to be, to speak out more in the future. And I think that's where the MVP programs may be sitting, is to say, well, actually 98% of the people were okay with it. But I'm an outlier who's going to move the community or leave the community, and I decided to leave rather than become one of the 98% who thought it was okay.
Well, I mean, the famous quote is, the only thing for it takes for evil to prevail is for good men and women to do nothing. So
Yes.
just because they just need to be aware that their silence is condoning that behavior, and people don't think about it. Honestly, they would probably read that, go, what an idiot, and they wouldn't necessarily think about the impact of that, or they would just delete it and ignore it and put it and just forget about it. But it can really hurt people.
That's right. And I know I've got the reputation as being, as one person put it, an interfering old bag, which I've taken to be a compliment, because I think that you have to speak out when you see stuff. And it doesn't mean I always get it right. I mean, I am still learning. But I think if you speak out, that marks you out as a leader rather than silence. When you think about women I admire, so Malala, Greta Thunberg, Kamala Harris, these are women that speak out with a passion and a conviction and an authority because they know this stuff and are speaking out about it. And that's who you remember, because they have spoken out. And they to me will always be leaders. And I think that's who I try and model myself on. They inspire me to speak up and speak out, and be an interfering old bag.
That seems a little bit kind of I don't know, what have you been interfering in? I mean, that seems really kind of, less of the old as well. I mean, that's just pushing beyond the pale.
It's people's unconscious bias, but the truth is I could have been interfering in so many things. I'm quite opinionated. It could be a range. Pick one.
Well, you know what's been really interesting? You've mentioned things, 5 or 6 different points, which we do as Microsoft employees as part of our training. You have unconscious bias training. You have diversity inclusion training. You have allyship training. And even more stuff that, I had to do a few months ago. So it's the idea is it's part of the culture. So obviously the fact that it isn't happening in that program or didn't happen is a failure and something that needs to be sort of picked up on. And you don't burn it down, but you fix it.
Agree. So I think at Microsoft you've got the thing about the growth mindset, haven't you?
Yeah.
So the way that I look at that is, to have a growth mindset, you need to have a discovery mindset first. And that discovery mindset says, we've discovered we've got a problem. And the growth mindset is about, okay, so we know and we recognize where we are, we're going to move forward from here. But I think because the issues I was having were never discovered, because I was raising them, but I wasn't being heard or seen or valued, that suddenly I was not able to push towards the growth mindset because I couldn't get through the discovery mindset first. And I think that's what I mean really when I talk about this quite a lot. People need to be seen first, heard, and then valued. There's some evidence to show that sometimes people will forget what a female says in a meeting. And sometimes the shocking study for me was when they forgot that a woman was at a meeting because they hadn't seen her. A lot of it is perceptual as well. We are perceptions, data visualization, we construct the world around us all the time. And because of that, sometimes people just don't see things. We have blind spots. And the unconscious bias, I think, is about trying to make sure we push up and through those blind spots, that we recognize them, we acknowledge them, and we try and fix them.
Yeah, but without people speaking out and saying, look, everyone's got this blind spot because they're not noticing this. I mean, I remember, I think it was the Fast Show where there was the sketch of the 2 businessmen and a woman, and she would say the right thing, and then they would just ignore her and then come up with the same idea, and she'd be going, can you even see me?
I don't know the story of my life. Yes, I know it's too painful. Yes, it's difficult and it's true. I don't know if you've ever read a book, The Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. It was written in the 1960s. It is a classic of African-American literature. It's incredible. And it talks about this gentleman's experience as an African-American and how people don't see him. You could extrapolate from that being, a female in a meeting, perhaps, although the book is much darker. I recommend you read it. I'm trying to expand my reading at the moment so I can read outside, white male author, and trying to read different people from different backgrounds. And it's an incredible book. I recommend it if you're interested.
So before we get deep into that, let's do the most important question. So what is your favorite cheese? And tell me about your veganism. So let's do the first question first, and then we'll do the more interesting one afterwards.
Yeah, so my favorite cheese at the minute is vegan cheese. So
how?
I've got it in the fridge, but I've forgotten what it's called. So the reason I'm trying to become vegan is I'm going through some tests at the minute for some autoimmune disorders, and I found that just in my own, cutting out dairy products and things made me feel better. So I would say that I'm fairly healthy most of the time, but sometimes I do get quite tired. And I've just decided to go for some blood tests, and then they came back with that. So I'm not disabled, and I work, I do all that good stuff, and I am learning to manage myself better. And I think that's really important. I think veganism is part of that. I also watched an awful video on Twitter which showed the dairy industry and some of the practices in that. And that for me was it, because I am an animal lover. And I just thought, surely that happened decades ago, right? This isn't happening now. And I was completely wrong. And by seeing that, it made me change myself.
Have you seen the Simon Amstel? It's not really a documentary. It's a drama on set in like 50 years in time where everybody is vegan, and they're talking about how they looked back now and how horrified they are at the way we treated animals.
Yes, I've seen that, but I will watch for that.
Yeah,
Simon.
Yeah, it might not.
So just it
used to be on the BBC iPlayer. I don't know if it's on it anymore. And that is obviously shows some horrific stuff in there but it's what they do is part of it is about changing language, which then changes perception. So you might like that bit. So instead of, we don't just eat animals, it's not meat, it's flesh. How would you describe it if it was human? It's not killing. Well, it's, you would say that was murder. You would say that, whatever you're doing to them, it's the same as doing to another sentient, animals are just sentient, just like humans and just other creatures on this earth. And if you treat their death in the same way you would treat another human's death. And by changing that thought pattern and switching that around, you go, well, why would we treat animals that way? Well, because it's and obviously it's a lot of it's for profit and for not just for farming, but I wouldn't watch it. I'd be prepared to watch it. I wouldn't eat directly before it. I wouldn't eat meat before it. Let's just say that.
Yeah, thank you. I'll look for that, because I think you're right. It's all about profit, and I don't want to encourage these industries by paying them money. So I know it's more expensive for vegan. I use a food delivery service, although Ocado have just been. I use another service called the Mindful Chef, and they do ethically sourced everything. But I'm not taking the meat from it, because I was vegetarian anyway. I'd been vegetarian since a child. But I just felt, no, I need to take the extra step, because I think that what I buy, what I purchase, and what I eat says something about my values, and I don't want those values. I don't want to be encouraging an industry which does that. So I know it's a big question to what cheese I like.
Yeah, so,
but that was why.
Well, no, is there a particular brand of vegan cheese? Because I tried some vegan Gouda, and that was, it was like rubber. That was difficult to eat.
Yeah, I've forgotten. It's in the fridge, actually.
Is it like a cheddar or because we have a soft cheese as well?
It's like a light cheddar. It's in a clear plastic packet, because I buy the slices. Yeah. I do that just because I never eat a whole block of anything, of any cheese, never mind vegan. So the packaging, I think, is great. I will look it up and tweet it out afterwards.
Okay, yes, I think I know that one. So yes, my wife has that, but she's not a vegan. She quite like that cheese, which is just really strange. Yeah, it's coconut.
Good for her. Anything people do is a good thing. You always bless your diet when you have something that's good for you like that.
Yes. So do you consider yourself vegan or plant-based? And I'm not really sure. There is a subtle difference. So is it just... I think
probably more vegan, because I don't just eat plant things, if that makes sense. So I try and I do eat like vegan sausages, so there might be plants in there. There's probably a whole bunch of other stuff in there.
All right, so the tricky vegan question. Okay, so there's two things. So one, honey. Obviously you don't stand on honey, but where would you stand on honey if you did stand on honey?
So I don't want to eat honey, and there's a few reasons for that. I worry about bees. I've got a thing about bees. I'm very glad to see that my local council actually won an award today for looking after bees. If I could have bees in my garden, I would. I used to do some work for Nokia, and they had beehives on their roof, and I thought that was just amazing. So no, I'm not a fan of it. I feel that we should leave them alone to do what they should do. You know.
You can have a hive in your house. Well, not in your house. Clearly, that's crazy. I mean, in a room. But you can have a hive in your back garden. Our neighbours used to have 3 of them, and we would get swarms in the summer. You know, and then we'd have the neighbour who was in his 70s climbing. I'd be holding this ladder for this neighbour who'd be then a swarm in the tree and he'd be knocking them down.
I've got a tiny garden. I'm not sure if I'd be allowed, but I do have bats at the front. I know it's not really related, but I do have bats, and they fly at you. So I'll be walking the dogs at night, and they just fly and they sort of scuff your hair. I hope they do it to everyone and not just me. I'm not sure what that says, but I've got used to them. You can't move them anyway. They're protected. But I like my bats.
Do they get close enough to move your hair?
Yes. Yeah, they can be surprisingly tame. They don't like sit in your hands or anything, but I don't know if I'm just disturbing them, and they get so close I can feel them. I think it's because they're right outside, and I was a bit cross actually because they actually came from someone else's house, and they were living in the roof, and he shouldn't have done it, but he got rid of them from the roof, and that is not right. Because they're protected, you should need to leave them. So they moved to the tree outside my house. So I've got this tree and it's shimmering and shaking at night because there's a lot of them.
That's bizarre. I mean, when I walk the dog, if you go at the right time at dusk, you'll have them going round your head because I attract flies. So they're picking off the insects that are attracted to my musk, I think.
I didn't think. Oh, maybe it's that,
Yeah, that's all I can. Or I'm disturbing the insects walking along, and effectively, they're attracted to the light on the torch, and then you find that you get bats just zooming past your head. They get close, but I haven't noticed them get that close that I can feel them brushing against me.
Yeah, it feels a bit odd. Because I always jump when they do it. You're not expecting me. It's like they're dive bombing you. Maybe they just don't like me. I can understand that. But I'd rather they get, their space. But I guess it's just, I don't know why they do that. I didn't expect them to get that close, but they do. Yeah. But I quite like them. I'd leave them alone, to do their bat thing.
Yeah.
I also got a fox sleeping in my garden. I'm not a huge fan of the fox, but again, just leave them. Her, I think it's a girl, to do what she wants to do.
Foxes get a bit noisy, but
yes,
but you can tame them. You can put out food, and they get very tame. We have had if we leave a bin bag out, it will get ripped up. I'm not sure if it's a neighbour's cat or a fox, possibly badger, deer. It's possible. We live a bit in rural, so we do get I don't know, dinosaurs or whatever we have. It could be anything. Right. So I've taken up a lot of your time. I've got a couple of questions. One, the normal 2 standard finishing questions I'll give you, and then what I wanted to ask is, do you look at ingredients and it'll say suitable for vegetarians and scan down, and then you go, right, well, there's no dairy products, there's no egg, there's no nothing like that. And it just says made in a factory where they may have egg or milk or whatever. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, I think I am.
Okay.
I think I'm still learning about being vegan, if that makes sense. And trying to just make sure I eat things that are vegan, but I think it's hard to get the range of things that you would like if you just ate only plants or only vegetables. So I think, so we eat like cereal bars and things which say they're vegan, but they do say potentially with milk. And I don't know if they're just being extra careful. Yeah. In an ideal world, I'd make my own from scratch, but I'm a terrible cook, so that just wouldn't happen.
I do the same thing as you. If it doesn't have any dairy products on it, but says it may have traces because it's in a place, I'll eat that. I'm not that strict. But I haven't noticed really much restriction in diet. From going from vegetarian, I've been vegetarian for longer than I've been, for more years than I've been alive. I kind of, for more than half of my life. Can't have been more years I've been alive, because that doesn't make any sense, does it? But yeah, for the last couple of years, I can't remember how long, I just thought, well, I'll just do it.
Yeah.
And it hasn't really made that much difference. And eating out is actually it's really easy, because everywhere has a vegan option.
Yes, that's true. I think the thing that I miss are things like milk chocolate, which is
vegan chocolate it's like dog chocolate. Not that I know what dog chocolate, but if I knew what dog chocolate tastes like, then
yeah, that's what I miss though. My son will buy like a £2 big Galaxy, and I'm just thinking, and then I think I need to educate this child better. But I think it's about trying to find treats and things which are not making me think about chocolate so much. But I think I tend to want chocolate when I'm tired. So the idea then is to have something else, or just not get that tired in the first place, try and eat better. So I think being vegan and thinking about ingredients, so you think more about your food and being more mindful, rather than thinking about, I'll just, take the easy option. It's about taking the harder road, I think.
Nah, you can still take the easy. I mean, I went to Tesco's. Other supermarkets are available, and there were these, their own version of Frazzles, like bacon crisps for those who aren't aware. And they were vegan. I mean, it's the only thing that shocked me was I make my own hummus now. I started doing that, and it's so easy. But I saw some Marmite hummus that has milk in it. You can, I see your face. You're not a Marmite fan. All right.
One of those. Yeah, I had a partner once who used to love Marmite. And I used to kill the Marmite by putting it in the fridge because I hated it so much. We're not together now. I think I can see why.
It would go like tar if it was in the fridge, so thick.
Yeah. I was really mean sometimes, but I just hated the smell. So my dog is here. Can I bring him up?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, you're such a good dog. Oh, here he is.
Oh.
So this is Archie. I don't know if you can see him very well. But we were just getting on to the last question, and he's definitely not vegan, I should add.
All right, so we've got two questions. One is who to nominate. So who you think should have the same chat with me. And so while you're thinking about that, is a question from the Richard Herring emergency question book. Are you aware of Richard Herring?
No, sorry.
No one is. Don't worry. You're in the majority there. It seems to be just me. He's got 1,001 questions. So you come up with a number between 1 and 1,001, and I read the question out. I check the question. If it's rude, we pick another one.
Okay, that sounds good.
So there's no prep. I haven't prepped you. I don't know what number you're going to pick. So
okay.
What?
I'll go for 999. If there is one.
Yeah. Well, hopefully there's 1,001. Now, the ones in the high ranges are.
No, we've got the other dog ones.
Yeah, we can have this one.
Good.
All right. Can you tell me in huge detail about my religious beliefs on condition you don't question or contradict me? So, can I please tell you in huge detail about my religious beliefs on the condition that you don't question or contradict me? It's a really awful question.
It's an awful question.
Because it's just all you can do is go yes or no. So let's have another one.
I suppose, yes, I could, because, I wouldn't want to contradict. I tend to learn so much about other people's religions if I just sit and listen and try and ask probably really stupid questions.
Nah, man, lots of gods. Man, I don't. There are lots of gods I don't believe in. I'm an atheist about so many gods. There you go. I don't believe
I
in.
tend to believe towards Buddhism, actually. I just find it's more. There's a Buddhist temple near my house.
See, I don't think Buddhism counts. See, I think isn't that more of a
religion, actually.
That's more of a philosophy and a structured way of thinking.
Yes, it's not really a religion. You're right, and but people tend to accept it as one. But I really miss that with the lockdown. I've been trying to read some texts, but I just loved going to the temple. I used to go and speak to the monks, and they're just the most incredibly wise people, and I really admire them. And it was almost like every week just taking a drink, like a cold drink, and just letting your mind think about something completely different. And I learned something really wise every time.
Sorry, that just reminded me on LinkedIn, when people just randomly connect up with you, I normally say yes, because as long as they're not trying to sell anything or they want me to join a group. Whoever. And then I read someone's bio, and it had that they do this and that they were wise.
Mm-hmm.
How do you describe yourself as being wise?
I know.
No, I'm an idiot. I'm not. Maybe if I live to, a ripe old age of 200, I might have some wisdom, but I'm full of jelly beans and anger.
Yeah, I know. I'm the same, I think, to be honest. I don't consider myself wise. I consider myself learning. And the more I feel I've learned, the more I feel I don't know. So I think that I've decided I'm not good enough to have imposter syndrome, because having imposter syndrome suggests that you're actually brilliant in the first place, but you don't realise it. Whereas I just think my life is just full of reality checks rather than imposter syndrome. And that's what I've come to.
How can you have imposter syndrome of imposter syndrome?
You know what I mean, though? It's
you're not good enough to have imposter syndrome
to recognise your own brilliance. But if you're not brilliant in the first place, how can you have it? And that's where I am. I've got reality checks. Every now. Yes, I have.
You see, I think dogs have got the right idea.
Yes.
I don't know.
A dog shows their heart, so they get to know yours. And I think that's just such a lovely. Dogs are better than people. Yes.
Ours is just, I don't know, just kind of thick, unfortunately.
Yeah, with these two, they're not thick. The other one's next to me. They're not thick. They just regard commands as optional rather than recommended or even required.
Yeah. I don't think it's that. I think that we could train her to, because I think you could train any dog to obey commands. She just does daft things, like just I'll be digging in the garden and then she'll just suddenly decide to dig where I'm digging. It's just like, it's not nice for the help, but a shovel's going to be better. Or shove her nose in like some fresh soil, or walk in a puddle, but for no reason. Just there's plenty of.
Yeah.
Why? You're just going to have wet paws, and then you'll jump on me later with wet paws. Come on, that was a terrible question. Let's have another one.
Yes.
What number?
Over 77. So I'm going to pop them down.
Oh, 77. You know what? The low numbers go quickly. 77. So
it isn't like being picked up.
No, you can't have that one. Pick another one.
All right, okay. 78.
All right, okay. This is going to be a bit bizarre. If I can guarantee that you would be unkillable, indestructible, and uninjurable for the next 10 years, but you would die once a decade was up, would you go for it?
No, no, I wouldn't. I think that we learn a lot from pain, usually not to do stupid things again. Like, touch the oven or, attack your freezer when you're defrosting it with a knife and then accidentally cutting yourself, which is what I did earlier today. So things like that. I think I need pain to help me to stop being stupid repeatedly, more than once.
Yep, wooden spoon. Wooden, if you're attacking the freezer, wooden spoon. I know that's not even the right thing to do, but you're gonna get less hurt with a wooden spoon.
Yeah, and I should defrost the damn thing much more often. But no, I just get so fed up. It took about 3 hours. So anyway, that's welcome to my life, and this is why I say I can't have imposter syndrome. It's just all reality checks.
Yeah, but that's the same for everybody. That's if I showed you a picture of a half fridge, we've got the point of the ice coming down, and you're having to put food. Yeah, no, it's the same for it's the whole thing with Instagram where people post up pictures of how great their life is, and you just go, no, that's not. No. Life is like walking down the street and treading in dog mess. That's just what happens. It isn't. This amazing thing happens for like a nanosecond, and the rest of life you walk around smelling terrible.
That's right. Yes.
That's just me, I think. Maybe.
No, I'm with you.
Well, there was more I wanted to talk about. I think that I'll have to let you get back to your son, and I need to walk my dog. See, she doesn't even know that we're in here. She normally sits behind the chair, right behind the wheelchair. The chair, not wheelchair, but chair with wheels, so that I can't move the chair back. Otherwise, I'll run into her.
You're trapped. They know, you see. They know power.
Yeah, I don't know. Is that smart or just dumb? It's either really smart or really dumb, and I haven't worked it out yet. So what we'll do is we'll save, the thing about your ring, Amazon ring, not wedding ring or any other kind of like jewelry, and because I was interested to find out what happened with that, and we'll save it for next season if you're happy to come back on and talk to me.
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you for having me along.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here. And
that's okay. I mean, that's what I love about these podcasts and things. I get to talk to someone for an hour who I'd like to see, because otherwise life just flies by and you don't get the chance.
Yeah, well, you just end up working and talking to people you work with rather than people that you want to have a nice chat with. And they're great for that, working with, but not necessarily, someone you want to sit down and have a coffee with.
That's right. Yeah. And it's nice, and I like your idea of having different people on at different times. So I think, especially in the pandemic, it feels kind of make or break for the community at the minute, especially if there's issues with PASS, for example. I think that if people don't stay in touch, things will start to fragment, and that would be really sad.
Yeah, well, I think something will pick up in its place if something happened to PASS. I mean, PASS is unusual because it's paid for. So unlike other community events, which are purely driven on non-profit, people doing stuff in their own time, when you've got employees and it's a whole different kettle of fish. So, and that's all I know about PASS. I don't know, but you were a regional director. Is that the right
term? I was a mix of regional director for that programme. I gave them opinions, and I don't think they wanted that. They prefer cheerleaders, and I don't do cheerleading unless I really want to. But I think we'll see what happens with PASS. I just see people tearing each other down in social media, and I don't like that. I think it's got a difficult time ahead. I see almost 2 tiers of community. I see like the free stuff, and then I see stuff which is paid. And I think maybe more like Secobits, where you pay a fee and that goes into a fund and then they use that for the next one. And you've also got dynamic communities. They look after the Power Platform community. The tickets for that are way more expensive, and they have a PASS type structure where it's run by a company, and it's it's community, but it's not, because it's owned by people. And I think it's good to have something for everyone, because if you turn up to like one of the big events where you've paid your money, whether that's dynamic communities or SQL bits, you're going to get a good level of service, if you like. It's sometimes free events, it's your luck of the draw, but that's the risk you take, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that there's a certain pressure for speakers to be at a certain level and to be able to deliver when they're not necessarily being paid for it, but people are paying to be there, so you're aware of that. But free events, right, right, it's my room, right? Maybe we need to end the conversation, but there's a comedian I really like called Stuart Lee.
Oh yes.
You know who he is, but you don't know who he used to be in a double act with Richard Herring. But
and he used to some of his stuff was written by Chris Morris of Brass Eye.
Yeah.
He's a brilliant comedian. Sorry, you were saying.
There's a lot about deconstructing comedy and deconstructing and even to the point of explaining stuff to people, and deconstructing the fact you're explaining it to people. And I kind of really like that idea. I see a lot of parallels between speakers and comedians.
Yeah.
Because you're doing that performing to a room who don't necessarily want to be there. Some of them are only there because they've been told to be there. Some really want to be there. And if your relationship with them can be different depending on the size of room, how many are in the room, and they do so many performances that they get so good at it. As where speakers who attend events, might do 20 times a year, they might do the same session 3 or 4 times. As a comedian would do theirs hundreds of times.
Yeah.
So it's but that's why I was kind of interested in you doing the acting, is he does a lot of acting and he has that very defined persona of, this is Stuart Lee who's at home with his family and he's married to Bridget Christie, and then there's the very low status Stuart Lee who appears on stage, who is angry about appearing on stage because he has to talk to all these people that don't really want to be there to see him. But that's his character. But so I kind of I don't steal, but I steal bits of his stuff. I think it's quite funny to try them out on an audience and see how they work. But yeah, but for free events, I'll do that. But not for paid events. You've got to be a bit more professional.
Yes, that's true. I better let you go. I didn't mean to keep you so long. No. It's nice chatting to you.
No. Well, that's the whole point. The conversation. It's a bit of a shame that we have to wrap it up. But we'll have you back on season 4. I'll send you the details, and also then, think of someone else you think might be quite good to have a chat with. Don't have to be data community. It works quite well when I don't know them and I'm just finding stuff out about them.
Yeah, someone you might want to speak to is Mala Mahadev. I can give you her details. Yeah. She is a SQL family person, but she's done a lot of interesting things. She's lived in India. She's then moved to the US, and she thinks a lot about cultures. And she's a great DBA as well. She really knows her stuff. So I think it would be a very nice interviewee, because she's very warm-hearted, and you always get a straight answer from her. So I like her.
All right, great. Well, thank you, Jen, for being on Geeks on Screens with Coffee. I think in a couple of days, I'm speaking to Alex Whittles. Alex, you just get Alex going in a direction. He just takes over. It will just be the Alex show for 45 minutes.
He's a super nice guy. He's always nice to me every time he sees me.
I know.
But
behind the scenes, he's an absolute monster. He's a diva. Oh, he's terrible. Oh dear. Shouldn't say that out loud, should I? All right. Thank you, Jen. All right.